Bonjour, this is Jasmine. Thank you so much for stopping to smell the roses en route, madame. Today we have a very special guest, Erika Schmidt. She is a social activist and very active on social media, which is why I chose her for our Interesting People series. I'm very excited to introduce her to you. She will be joining me soon, so stick around and enjoy. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me.
Truly honored to. Thank you for asking me. And I think it's a really cool thing that you're doing.
Okay, great. So my first question to you would be, what made you be so vocal about your stances in politics?
Well, you asked me when you sent me the questions via email, you asked how I came to be interested in politics, which really made me think, and made me kind of go back to, I didn't really grow up in a political household. There was definitely not like the debates around the dinner table that you hear about families having. I did not have any practice at expressing my beliefs or like having people disagree with my beliefs. We just didn't talk about it. And some of my extended family, which is more conservative, is like impolite to talk about stuff like that. Kind of stereotypical Midwest, you know.
Yes.
I mean, in my experience, that stereotype was pretty true. And I've been realizing that more recently as I become more outspoken, and some of my family hasn't. But my mom, from time to time, would kind of talk about injustice when she saw it. I was in middle school when the O.J. Simpson trial was happening. She definitely started introducing me to some ideas as to how might Black jurors be seeing this case differently than I was, given generations of police abuse and corruption in the criminal justice system, stuff like that. The 2000 election I actually voted on my 18th birthday in that election. And then my mom was really upset about all the disenfranchisement that went on in Florida. So I, in retrospect, see that I was exposed through my mom.
A lot more than you thought.
Sorry?
A lot more than you thought.
Yeah, because it's not her vibe really. She's like, we had a lot of fun growing up, a lot of laughter. She's like super supportive. We did community theater together, But looking back, when I really try to pinpoint it, I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, we were actually having those conversations. It's taken me a very long time to start to shed the notion that I have to know everything 100% before I start talking about it.
Right.
Which I think is like a major tenet of white supremacy, actually, is this idea that you have to be perfect and an expert before you weigh in. Because it keeps a lot of people silent, especially women, I think. And that was definitely my case. I've always been a rule follower and kind of in awe of like my teachers and authority figures in general. And it's been a lot of just like, as I become aware of how important it is for me to speak up, it's like, a lot of it is kind of a physical swimming upstream effort of being like, I'm not comfortable, but I'm going to go ahead and just say this anyway.
Right. I want to give people a little context of how we know each other. We worked together in Chicago, and then I was thinking about it. It's been 7 years for me since I've been in Chicago, so quite a while.
Yeah, about the same.
And we weren't really close, or we weren't friends. We were really good coworkers, but nothing more. But 7 years later, I see you a lot. Your presence on social media, and I appreciate, it's refreshing to see someone so vocal about their outrage of the things that happen, because I know you talked a lot about justice for Breonna and justice for Ahmaud and the protests in Michigan, and I'm from Michigan, so I don't know if a lot of people are aware of what's happening in states that they're not from, but I just think that's amazing. So back then, 7 years ago, my question is, were you this confident in making these views, or were you still more reserved?
That's a great question. I remember actually someone else who worked with us one time said to me, it was a man, this kind of like dude that we worked with. He was like, I love your Facebook page. You're just like so strident. And I was like, oh, what? Really? So I think I was communicating things back then, but in my perception, I wasn't, there was a lot that I didn't understand yet. And I think there's still a lot that I don't understand, obviously, but working at the restaurant was one of the turning points for me. You see in pretty high relief in a place like that, how people of color are treated.
Yes.
Right.
And is all a certain color, and then the people that are bussing the tables and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Very straightforward and
yeah. Yeah.
So
the 2004 election was probably like when I was in college, it was the lead up to the Iraq War. At that point, I was still like, this seems wrong to me, but I don't know what I'm talking about. Like the president must know more than I do. I just wasn't there yet where I felt like I could, like the people in charge could be wrong, you know?
Right.
And by 2004, I was breaking out of that a little bit. But
yes, because in my early 20s, even mid 20s, I wasn't really politically aware or politically inclined to ask questions or things like that. And I think the tipping point for me is when I had my first child, and it's like everything changed because things that are outside of my control affects, you know, my child. So I had to be more cognitive of what's going on around me. It's like I had to be the eyes and ears for someone else now. So I was more pushed to be concerned.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You start to see the bigger picture. It doesn't have to be someone in your neighborhood or someone you know. You start to see these systemic injustices and problems that are actually killing people, you know?
Right. And I was curious, is this your day job or?
No, I mean, the fact that you're labeling me as an activist makes me very uncomfortable because I feel like I'm really just doing the bare minimum, you know? My day job is I'm trying to be a writer, which we have that in common. And I had been a fiction writer. I was an actor for years, mostly was like trying to be an actor for most of my life. And then a couple of years before I left Chicago, I switched over to fiction writing, which had always been kind of my second passion. And which, to note, those are two disciplines that I think open you up to activism or, you know, seeing the world in the way you're describing. And I've been working basically in like support roles in entertainment since I moved out to California. And now I'm in LA actually like trying screenwriting, but I am like the lowest rung of the ladder at this point and just kind of working on my samples and trying to get representation and having these like low level jobs where I'm learning a ton, but it's been a huge like growth experience for me to learn how to try to have influence in those rooms when I don't, you know, I don't have any authority, but I'm trying to, like I'll often be the youngest in the room and trying to bring these conversations into these creative rooms.
I know it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. It's like, I have to just remind myself, it's like there are a lot of worse things, you know. It's uncomfortable for me as a white person to say things to other white people, or like in front of women of color who are in the room with me, and maybe they don't want me to be talking about this. Like, I don't know, but it's not as bad as the racism that people experience, you know. That's like the reminder is like my discomfort is a low priority. So, but it is challenging. So that's been the main way that I've been I try to move the needle in the rooms that I'm in, and I post a lot, and I'm way more comfortable expressing myself in writing. So it's kind of it's like a lighter lift for me in some ways because it just comes more naturally, and I
completely agree.
Yeah. And if somebody wants to disagree with me, I can like think about their response before I respond. It's like, I'm really not great at the back and forth, especially in these times when people get so hostile.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I want to know if you heard about the psychologist. Her name is Dr. Robyn DAngelo. And she
Yes.
did a book recently that came out called White Fragility. I haven't read it yet, but I watch a lot of her talks, and I think she's very, very informed and educated on this specific topic of how do you talk to other white people about their privilege and how they can share or be an ally to people who have a voice that is normally not heard. So,
yes. Yes, I haven't read the book either, but I kind of exactly where you are, it sounds like. I've watched her videos and read some of her stuff that she, just shorter pieces that she's written. And my first job out in California was at a larger corporation where I did get involved in some activism there with people within the workplace who were just trying to move the needle in terms of conversations about race. And that was a huge learning experience because there are just all these different dynamics depending on if it's me, a white person, talking to another white person who has a ton more power than I do, or if it's a person of color who's in that group. There are all these different ways of approaching these conversations, and the dynamics are so subtle.
Yes, it's very nuanced.
Yeah, but I think she really does talk a lot about how you have to get over your own discomfort and just like exist in it and accept that it's part of this as white people. And also the thing of
the word white, she was saying, can flip some people out. Like just acknowledging that. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Just using the term white people.
Yes.
I just saw something on Facebook or Instagram of that Facebook was blocking activists for using the phrase white people, Black activists for using the phrase white people. I mean,
that's
I shouldn't be
surprised. It's perfect. Like, it's a perfect.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about doing activism or being in this realm full time? Has that ever crossed your mind?
When I was at that corporate job, when I was thinking about leaving, I was I was in a position where I was going to be able to take a few months off before I had to start making money again. Sorry. And at that time, I had been really involved with activism at work, and I was living in Oakland, so there's so much going on. There's so much to learn in terms of activism and social justice. It's like really in the air there in this way that was so helpful and enlightening for me. And I moved there in 2013, and then, really became more activated when there were the rash of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile and Eric Garner and Trayvon Martin. Like there were like helicopters in the air all the time there. And it was, it's like right in front of your face, and all you do is step out your door and go in the streets with everybody else. And you learn so much just from being there. That was life-changing for me. But my activism at work, I did find that in terms of organizing, it took a lot out of me. Like, as opposed to writing, this did not come naturally to me. Like trying to figure out how to inspire other people or what to do next, or like, I would come home at the end of the day and just be so discouraged.
It's emotional drain too. It's not just a physical, or it touches you.
It really does.
About it.
And I saw people that I worked with who had more natural talent in that realm than I did. It did make me appreciate my writing more, because I realized that was easier for me than it was for some other people.
Yes.
It made me think about like finding what your
niche,
talents are, so that you can kind of like help as much as you can with the least amount of like whittling down of your being. I don't know, like, as you said, it's emotional, physical, cognitive drain. So anyway, when I left that job, I had been thinking, I think I probably want to focus on writing now, but I want to leave the door open if I wanted to yeah, maybe get a job in social justice. I don't know, I'd be starting at the bottom, and or maybe even just volunteer for a political campaign for a few months or something like that and see how I liked it. And I ended up going with the writing, and
Good for you.
I'm trying to have faith that I can help that way and be like a citizen advocate, you know, or something, what to call it.
And with
for now.
the media, do you ever get any backlash or negativity, or like, oh, Erika, you shouldn't, or why are you, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, on Facebook and Instagram, I think my circles are it's a bubble that I've curated for myself over the years, I think.
Okay.
And between being a theater person and a writer, like I don't have a lot of friends that I don't know, and the friends that I have that I don't know are through activism. So we basically agree. So I'm avoiding that in many ways. I see really like a lot of vitriol and what I think are sometimes pointless arguments in like the comments on some of my friends' posts. And my husband spends a lot of time really digging in with people like from middle school or whatever that disagree with his posts, that kind of stuff. And I guess I'm trying to think. I've definitely had pushback from my family, not necessarily on social media, but like my more conservative extended family who don't like to talk about this stuff. I tried sending an email and starting a conversation about white supremacy with these people, you know, like around the time Colin Kaepernick was protesting.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this might be a way in for us to talk about this. And we just have to, like, white people have to talk amongst themselves about this.
Yes.
And I have to start with my family, you know, and I sent this email that I tried to make it gentle and, you know, we don't have to, however you want to communicate with me about this, one-on-one, phone, whatever. And it was just radio silence. And so I would every once in a while email that thread again with some update. And then finally someone said, I don't think families should talk about this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then it just then a couple more people said that, and it just kind of killed the whole thing.
Okay.
And I had like 2 people from the list I had private conversations with. So I've had a couple of experiences like that where I've tried and failed. But you never know what you make people think about after the fact. So yeah, going back to social media, I did have one extended conversation like on private message with this guy I went to high school with who is now a pastor and a teacher, and he's Black and he voted for Donald Trump. And he reached out to me and wanted to talk because he said, we clearly both have really strong views, and I think that it comes from us caring about people, and I really just want to see if we can find some common ground. And I really respected him a lot in high school. I haven't known him at all since. So we did that, but it ended up just being so like, it just was, he shared more of his views with me and they were very disturbing, you know, just about poor people. And there wasn't, and meanwhile he would be making these snarky remarks on posts I would make and kind of antagonizing my friends and doing sort of trollish behavior on my wall. So finally I was like, I'm not sorry that we did this, but I don't think it's getting us anywhere. And that was a huge learning experience for me because I had a similar conversation going with one of my relatives in real life that was way more costly to me because there's emotion and family relationship involved.
Right.
And that actually kind of helped me wind down that family conversation too, which is like, I guess a loss in the activism sense, but I think it keeps me going longer. And to start to figure out what conversations are worth having and which ones you need to just leave behind.
Yes.
So I kind of focus with my posts on like sharing information, amplifying voices, and like empowering people who might basically already agree with me.
Okay.
Kind of morally, but they aren't activated yet, or they are in a place I was in years ago where I didn't believe I had a valid point to make, or
I feel like the people who talk the loudest typically don't know what they're talking about. and the people that are silent have more to contribute, but they think that they don't. So it's kind of
right, because they're like waiting to be 100% right before they say something.
like,
And we've seen, I mean, if there's one thing we've seen over the last few years, it's that, yeah, there are a lot of people in charge who just have no idea what they're talking about or what they're doing. And if the rest of us don't speak up, they're just going to keep doing that. Yeah. It's not always easy to remember that, but.
Because I see a lot of posts from a lot of people, and I feel like, I don't know if it's because we're in that generation of, you know, that older adult, mid-adult, where people are a lot more active, or I don't think, maybe it's just the climate, the political climate that's making people more ready to give their voice or give their opinion. But do you ever feel overwhelmed by it all, where you just want to stay silent and be like, okay, this time I'm just gonna not say anything about this topic or that topic?
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes, like right now, everything is in the gray area. Well, that's not really true. There are a lot of topics where I just don't really know. Like sometimes I get fatigue about feeling like I need to have a position on everything.
Mm-hmm. It is fatigue, yes.
When we talk about police killing people, I have no problem with talking about that ever. That's not a gray area.
Okay.
But you know, I have had a lot of fatigue. I'm sure everyone has. I mean, since Donald Trump was elected president, it's just such an onslaught all the time. And it's just tiring. And sometimes I do just feel like I need to step away. Not so much because I don't want people to know what I think, but because I just, for my own mental health, I need to take a break.
Exactly.
There's a really great app I use sometimes called Freedom,
okay,
where you can block yourself from whatever websites you want to. I started using it just to be more productive with my writing, but then once I started, I was like, oh, I feel so much better on the days when I don't go on Facebook.
Yes, yes. I feel this exact same way. I just felt like every time I logged on, I would tell myself in my head, why am I here? I don't really like these people. I'm like, you know, not to be mean to you.
Yeah.
But it's just very, I don't know, there's a narcissism to it. There's, I don't know, but.
Well, and it also, I think that the feeling of being compelled to like come down one way or another on every event that happens or everything a politician says or something, it's like kind of denying the fact that we're in the middle of a huge storm right now.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I feel like I've been pretty good at predicting what's going to happen since the 2016 campaign began, and that gives me no joy to say that. But this is going to be like a third-hand reference, but I was talking to my friend yesterday who said she heard George Saunders on the radio talking about how it's like asking people to describe this time is like asking someone to describe falling while they're falling.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to forget that with social media because it's just, and especially the way I use it or you use it where you're, it's not just like sharing pictures of pets, which I do a lot of that too, but it's mostly to communicate so that.
Yes, otherwise you probably wouldn't get your word to as many people.
Yeah, that's for sure. One thing that I have really learned and that I witnessed at my corporate job a lot was people who would, because they weren't becoming full-time activists or they weren't even doing as much as I was doing, they would feel like they couldn't do anything.
Oh, it's
like this thing of like, if I'm not doing everything, then I'm a loser and I'm not helping and I'm not going to do it. Like they let it stop them from even doing any small thing.
It's a paralysis.
Yeah. And I really sympathize with that. And I've kind of been there here and there myself. And I have a lot of insecurity about how much I'm contributing and stuff, but I just want to like put it out there that like, that's another way that to silence people. It's be like the only way you can help is to run for office or quit your job and
Right.
protest full time. You know, it's not true. There are a lot of like small lifts that people can do that actually do make a difference, whether it's like donating or text banking. I've done a lot of that. It's really easy.
And the next thing I want to discuss is the politics and the politicians and the election that's coming up in November. But we'll leave that to our Patreon viewers. So we'll say bye to YouTube. Bye.